In this video lecture, you are going to see the introduction part of object-oriented programming. This semester, you are going to learn object-oriented programming with Java. Java language you are going to learn this semester. Okay, now what is object-oriented programming? As the name implies, object-oriented means everything revolves around this object. So in object-oriented programming, object is the very important thing. Let me tell you in this way. Let's try to understand this example. There are some courses called job-oriented courses. You might have heard about a job-oriented course. What is job-oriented course? Job-oriented course means the syllabus is designed in such a way that at the end of that course or after finishing that course, you will be given a job or you will definitely get a job. So everything revolves around an important thing called job. That is called a job-oriented course. Here, object-oriented programming means everything revolves around object. We will see later the definition of an object, then different things related to object-oriented programming concepts. Now, before going to learn object-oriented programming concepts, let us first see what is the difference between procedure-oriented programming and object-oriented programming. Then we will be looking at object-oriented paradigm. Paradigm means a model, object-oriented model, the importance of object-oriented model. And then we will start learning object-oriented programming concepts.
Now we are going to see fundamentals of object-oriented programming. Just now I told you, in object-oriented programming, the important part or the crux is object. So everything circles around this object. Now these are the two topics which we are going to cover. Introduction of object-oriented programming. OOP means object-oriented programming, and basic concepts of OOP. There are a number of basic concepts. In this class, we are going to see only the first two basic concepts of. Now, before going to that basics of OOP or the concepts of OOP, now we see the difference between procedural programming and object-oriented programming. So first thing is procedure-oriented programming. It's a programming paradigm that is based on the concept of procedure calls. Now you see here, this is paradigm. This is called paradigm. Paradigm means a model. So procedure-oriented programming, it's a model which is based on procedure calls. You might have heard this word procedure, or in C language, there are certain procedures or certain things called functions. I think functions in C and C++. Functions and procedures, these two are very similar, but there are slight differences. But now you can understand that in procedure oriented programming, it is based on the concept of functions, whereas in object oriented programming or in object oriented paradigm, it is based on the concept of objects. So just now I told you once again that everything revolves around object in object oriented programming. So in procedure oriented programming, the first point is over. The second point is emphasis is on functions. In C language, functions, how to write a function. Here the basic program or the entire program is divided into number of functions, whereas the emphasis is on objects here. So everything is object in the object oriented programming. In the third point, it divides the program into multiple functions and procedures. These two are very similar words. Here, the entire program is divided into objects in object-oriented programming. Now here, functions, they communicate with each other by passing parameters. One function can pass some parameters to some other function. So in this way, functions communicate with each other. Here, objects can also communicate with each other by passing some messages. We'll see later how to pass messages. Now, the C language, it comes under procedure-oriented programming because there are no objects in C language. Whereas in C++ and Java, we have objects, and also in Python, there are many other languages which are called object-oriented programming languages. And these languages are called uh, procedure-oriented programming languages. Now, in object-oriented programming, it treats data as a critical element. Here, data as a critical element. Critical element here means it is an important element in the program development. So C++ supports OOP features. We are going to see later what are different OOP features. So we are going to learn Java, right? So Java is an object-oriented programming language. Even in Java also, everything is an object. We create number of objects and we work with objects. Important features of object-oriented paradigm. Just now I told you the meaning of this word paradigm means it is it's a model. It's a model. Okay, then here emphasis is on data rather than procedure. In object-oriented programming, emphasis is on data and objects, right? Not procedures. Here programs are divided into what are known as objects. In object-oriented programming or object-oriented paradigm, programs are divided into objects. Functions that operate on the data of an object are tied together in the data structure. This point also we are going to see later. Data is hidden. How to hide data? We'll see later how to hide data, which is not possible in procedure-oriented programming. New data and functions can be easily added whenever necessary because data and functions, they are packaged in a single packet, and so every time we can create or easily add new data and functions. Then it follows a bottom up approach in programming design. See, there are two types of approaches. One is top to bottom approach, second one is bottom to top approach. So top to bottom approach is followed by procedure oriented languages or procedure oriented programming languages. Just now I told you that C language is a procedure oriented programming where everything is written in terms of functions or procedures. Whereas in bottom up approach, we deal with objects. So we create objects, number of objects, then we combine those objects to write the code for our program. So object oriented programming is a bottom to top approach. Then procedure oriented programming is a top to bottom approach. These are the basic concepts of object oriented programming. So there are a number of things here. Now, as I told you, we are going to see only the first two concepts. So objects we are going to study, then classes. Maybe in the next class, we'll be looking at the remaining things. Now let us try to understand what is an object and then what is a class. I think you have already studied these things in your C++. So it is very easy to understand now. So once again, if you listen, then it is well and good. You can get the idea from your previous C++ programming language also. Now, what's an object? We know that object is a real world entity. A real world entity means it must be an existing thing. It should be an existing thing. So every object has some attributes and operations. So this is a very, very important point. every object has two parts or two things. One is attributes and the second one is operations. We will see later what an attribute is and how to write operations. We can also operate on the attributes of an object. Just now I told you every object has attributes and operations, and these operations they are performed on the attributes. An object may represent a person or any item that program must handle. So real world entity means it must be an existing thing, an existing person or an existing thing is called an object. So these are some of the two definitions of an object. An object is a software bundle of related variables and methods. Here bundle means it is a package, right? It is a package of two things. What are the two things? One is attributes, second one operations. Here they used some other words, variables and methods. Variables means attributes, methods means operations. Then an object is an instance of a class. We'll see later when we declare a class, we'll see how to create an object. Then let us take an example. Here table is an object, right? We are taking this example table as an object. So just now I told you object means what? It is a real world entity. It should be existing. Yes, this table is existing. So it is called an object. Now every object has two important things, right? What are they? One is attributes and the second one is operations. So simply I'm writing here, trying to write with my mouse. One is, yeah, first one is attributes, second one operations. So every object has attributes and operations. Just now I told you this table is an object. Now what are the attributes? Attributes means some of the characteristics. What are the attributes? Length is an attribute. Yes, width is an attribute. Then height, this height is an attribute. So length, width and height, these are the attributes of a table. Now I think you can understand that these three are given three different values. For example, if the length is 400 centimeters, length is 400 centimeters, so all these things we can give some values, like width also, like height, you can give some value. So these are called attributes of an object. Now what are operations? In this example we see operations means some work must be done on these attributes. For example, first one is pushing. This person is pushing the table or moving the table. Now this is some action, right? This is called operation. Now cut, this is, I can cut the table into two halves, right? So this is also an operation. Now paint, if I do some work, then it is called an operation. Now I think you can uh, differentiate between attributes and operations of an object. Attributes means the characteristics of a table, which can be measured by a number, like length, width, height. I can also add color, right? Color is also an attribute of this table. Now these are attributes. Then operations. What are the operations? Pushing, cutting, painting. These are operations. See, I have included parenthesis, means these are functions in C language, right? Here in Java, we call these things as methods: push, cut, and paint. So attributes and operations. The combination of data and methods make up an object. So what is an object now? Object has two parts or two important things. What are they? First one is data and the second one is a method. So first one is data and the second one is method. So you can write a formula. This is the formula. What is that formula? Object is equal to data plus methods. So if this is an object, Now two parts. What is the first part? Data part. What is the second part? Method part. Now these two are different words, right? Data and methods. So there is no confusion here. Data means attributes, methods means operations. So you can write like this also. Object is equal to attributes plus operations, or object is equal to data plus methods. Attributes and data both are similar words. Operations and methods both are similar words. Yeah, another object. What is this object? Person. A real world entity. Yes, person is there. Now it is an object. Every object has two parts. What are the two parts? First part is data part. Second part is operations or methods part. Data part, name. We can write some value here, right? Name. Then basic pay. We can write some value here. And salary, see, this is like a method. This is an operation. Method means it is an operation. We should write some code to calculate the salary. How we should write? See, basic pay. And the first one is basic pay. Then plus some DA, some plus some HRA. This is the calculation part of salary, right? So when we do some work, then it is called a method or operation. Now tax calculation, this is also a method. So every object has two parts. That's what you should remember, in a clear way. Next, let us go to the class. Just now we finished discussing object. Now class. What is a class? Here it is a definition of a class. A class is a blueprint of an object that contains variables for storing data and functions to perform operations on the data. Once again, we are repeating the same thing. What is that? Object contains variables for storing data and functions. So what is an object? Object is a combination of data and functions. Now this class is used to create an object. That's what we should do. What is the use of a class? A class is used to create an object. We cannot directly create an object. First we create a class. What is a class? It is a blueprint. Blueprint means it just gives the outlines. So a particular person has some name and salary. That is the blueprint. Then based on the blueprint, we will create an object. Now a class will not occupy any memory space. Why? Why? Because it is just a blueprint. This is just an outline, and hence it is just a logical representation of data. In object-oriented programming languages, it is compulsory what to create a class for representing data. So first we create a class, then we will create objects based on the class, or after creating the class we can create objects. Okay, remaining things we see later.